Hello, everyone. This is Rob once again with Media Awareness, and I'm here tonight to talk about Journey Raised on Radio, which was released in 1986. Interestingly, the new Journey album, Freedom, which was the original title for Raised on Radio, is scheduled to be released on July 8th, 2022, next Friday, and I am really psyched for that. I love Arnell on lead vocals, and the songs I've heard so far have been great, and the writing of Neil and Jonathan are just is amazing. Um, so let's take that writing and combine that with that of Steve Perry, and you get most of the band's major hits from 1981's Escape onward through Frontiers, Raised on Radio, even Trial by Fire. The songs were primarily written by Perry, Kane, and Sean. Raised on Radio has been called by some Steve Perry's second solo album. His first, of course, being Street Talk from 1984. However, um, I don't believe that's the case at all. Individuals cite the difference in sound, that it's a lighter sound, that it's a more keyboard heavy sound. And I'm going to counter that by saying that it was 1986 and everyone was keyboard heavy at that point in time. REO Speedwagon, Chicago, just to name a couple. And if you expand from there, the Hooters, the Outfield, they all had this really commercially accessible, friendly sound. The songs were written well, the songs were played well, and that's what really mattered. There have been different lineups of Journey over the years. I think more so recently than in the past. That being the case, I think this video is very relevant because people always complain that Steve Smith and Ross Valerie were fired from Journey, and they were. Steve Smith did play on Positive Touch. The rest of the album on drums was Larry London. Michael Baird, I believe, did the live tour for Raised on Radio, and Randy Jackson replaced Ross Valerie on bass guitar. Randy did not replace Ross, though, for lack of talent. Ross is an extremely talented bass guitarist. And if you have any doubt in your mind about that whatsoever, check out Todd Rundgren's 1991 Second Wind album. He sought out the talent of Ross Valerie to play on that album, and Ross does a stellar job. So it was, in my opinion, to get a different style, a 1986 style, not a 1983 Frontiers style. They didn't want to recreate Frontiers or Escape. They wanted to do something new. And I think that maybe and Steve Smith, Ross Valerie and Steve Smith, wanted to maybe stick with the same sound. Maybe they didn't, but who's to say? It was 1986. The behind the music alludes to the fact that there was regrets about firing them, and I can imagine that there was. However, when you take into account recent events with the band and the issues they've had recently with over the past couple of years with Ross and Steve Smith basically now not even being part of the band at all in any capacity, even their organization. There's a lot to take into consideration and to think about with that. And there's a lot of shuffling members going in and out of the band. The consistent members are, of course, Neil Sean and Jonathan Cain at this point. If you look at Raised on Radio, and if you look at who wrote the hits, you have Jonathan Cain, Neil Sean, and Steve Perry collectively. Raised on Radio, they wrote and co-wrote every song. It was not a Steve Perry solo album by any means. It was a collaborative effort. As mentioned, in the studio, that's one thing. You have Larry London on drums. And the drum sound, the production sound itself, I should say, on Raised on Radio is better than Escape and Frontiers put together. Escape and Frontiers sound like early 1980s albums. Raised on Radio, although it does have a 1980s sound, it has a more timeless production sound. It is more keyboard heavy, but as I stated, that was the time. If you went too far in either direction, you were damned. If you went too heavy, let's say the band decided to go for a heavier sound and up one from Frontiers and up the guitars to 11 and just go with that, they would be labeled a hair band. I'm convinced of that. It happened with Whitesnake, it happened with Dokken, it happened with Bon Jovi. Those were all labeled eventually as hair bands. And when you look at Journey, they were never referred to as a hair band because they never were. They might have had the big hair, but they weren't labeled as a hair band because they didn't have that sound. If they went slightly heavier, they would have. If they went slightly lighter, fans would say the album is too weak. Raised on Radio was my first Journey purchase album. First song I heard by them was actually Only Solution from the Tron soundtrack of all things. But I like the song. First album, though, that I purchased was Raised on Radio, and in the documentary that was aired on MTV at the time, Neil Sean and Jonathan Cain both praise the computer technology at the time and the MIDI technology specifically, and the ability that it gives them to emulate different sounds on stage that previously they were unable to recreate live. And they rave about this. So they were excited to make this album and to perform these songs live. I like Raised on Radio a lot. It's one of my favorite Journey albums. I do love Dream After Dream. I mentioned that yesterday in my previous video. That album is in my top for Journey. But I feel like Raised on Radio needs a little defending in its corner because it has great songs. There are no throwaway tracks. That's one thing I will say that is different from Escape and Frontiers, which both have 2 to 3 throwaway tracks. Now, what's a throwaway track? It's a song that is comprised, it is written, composed specifically to fill time on the album. To give the album the extra 3.5 minutes or the extra 4 minutes or 2 minutes that the album needs. Raised on radio, every song just was spectacular. And I recall listening to the album from beginning to end over and over again on vinyl and then on CD. And now, of course, on remastered CD. So I'm going to urge some of you who have written this album off to go back and revisit it with a fresh mindset, not expecting Frontiers Part 2, not expecting Steve Perry's second solo album, but expecting Journey, but Journey from 1986, not Journey for 1981 or 83, not Journey for 1996. Journey 1986 was a very different journey. And I feel like Randy Jackson and Michael Barrett in the live performances brought a lot to these songs, even the classic material. In the studio, Larry London playing drums was great. Steve Smith on Positive Touch was great. But the album really gets a lot of crap that it shouldn't from fans. And it's only because I think fans want to hear the same thing or something similar to the same thing. Change is inevitable. And we have all embraced, at least, okay, let me rephrase that. Those of us who are open-minded have embraced the changes within Journey. From Greg Rowley in the early to mid 1970s to Greg Rowley and Steve Perry, to Steve Perry, to Steve Algeri, to Jeff Scott Soto and Dean Castronella, to now Arnell. And Arnell is singing his ass off, and he is amazing. And I applaud them. I applaud them for continuing to bring us, the fans, quality music, and I cannot wait for Freedom, July 8th, 2022. This is Rob for Media Awareness. If you like this video, or if you're intrigued at least, click the like, click the not like. It's up to you. I don't really care. But leave a comment if you're inclined to do so. Check out my Patreon page. Check out the Amazon wish list on the main page. Check out everything that there is to check out. And keep on following these videos. My next video, I'm returning to the Kate Bush discography for an overview of her catalog. That'll be probably tomorrow. However, for this evening, this is Rob with Media Awareness. Have a good night. Bye.